Welcome to another episode of AI After Hours. Each month, we cut through the hype around AI and call bullshit on the headlines we see that are really not true at all. Join us for a monthly roundup of AI news and insights on what's true and what's not in the world of artificial intelligence. Have a question or wanted to address a topic? Email us at support@aicareerboost.com and join in on the conversation. Let's dive into the world of AI together.
I'm your co-host, Yuying Chen-Wynn. I'm a product and technology executive with extensive experience in AI and education. I'm currently leading Applied AI at Peak 6, focused on everything generative AI and actually understanding what it means to meaningfully leverage AI into your business. And I really love talking about it, especially with my co-host, Polly Allen.
Hi, I am that co-host. My name's Polly, and I've been working in tech for over 20 years. Most recently, I've been working in AI at Amazon's Alexa AI, where I launched the first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. But since then, I've left and started my own company, AI Career Boost, to help get more people involved in the world of AI in their careers. I'm also a Women of the Future 2023 winner, and I also love talking about AI, especially with fun people like Yuying. So Yuying, what's in the bevy drink this month? We do AI After Hours. We always have something on the go. What do you have in?
All right. I have a lovely
Yeah.
little
Ooh,
sake, very dry,
ooh, sake.
very
Nice.
classy. Ooh.
Excellent. Yes, I have a Willamette Valley red. I'm a wine girl, especially on a Friday. So it's
Oh
the
yeah.
way to go.
That's That's yeah, very classy. Both of us super classy today. Unlike usual, but
I know. I was like, we have to call that out because it doesn't happen very much. Let's
yeah,
dive into the
yeah,
news. What
exactly.
have we got this month?
All right. So this is a month of April. Had a very busy kind of second half. But before I go into the headlines, I want to talk a little bit about how we pick them. So within each month, the AI has about somewhere between 30 to 100 different headlines, depending on the month. So how do we pick the three, maybe two, maybe four that we talk about? It's actually the ones that we think has enough impact that you, as someone who is not developing, who just want to understand how it's changing, whether it needs to change something that you're thinking about, some assumptions, etc. So if it's something that only developers feel
Yeah.
in terms of the impact, we don't talk about it. So, and we try to categorize kind of major ones to see the big changes. So with that, hopefully that gives you a little bit idea how we pick three out of 300. Okay, not quite 300, but
A lot.
sometimes we're just biased and it's just fun. So there's that. But let me get into the couple of ones that we're going to talk about for April. So we're going to start on the LLM side. There's a whole bunch of updates, but I want to talk about Llama 3, which is the latest update LLM that's open source from Meta that dropped only like last week, essentially. So, really big ones dropped. The main thing that I want to highlight with Llama 3, so number one, it's open source, which means you can download the waste, you can run it yourself, you can keep it private on-prem and cloud. And the second one of the ones that not everybody quite noticed. So if you remember last month, the EU AI Act came out, and because of that, if you look at Llama 3's availability in regions, it is not available in Europe. Open
Oh,
source means people can have access, but not in Europe because they're looking at that regulation and going, I don't know. This is why I wanted to highlight it. Not only that it's cool and open source, and it's the fastest open source model right now, but we're going to see the impact of the EU AI Act. Did it just make European enterprises a little less competitive because they won't have access to this? So that's going to be my question to you, Polly. What do you think about number one, this update,
yeah.
and that particular little aspect of it?
It's interesting. So, of course, the horse race between enterprise and private LLMs is the big story, right? Where understanding if these companies that have built up all of this advantage of being able to build really distinctive capabilities with their LLMs, if you can just take a model and then run something with the same capabilities for free, that really destroys a lot of the value that they've built up. And as we're seeing, a lot of these models still like the private models like OpenAI's, Claude, etc., do have the advantage on a lot of benchmarks over the even the most advanced open source models. But this is a huge step forward as far as I've seen on the benchmarks. Llama 3 is really promising. And it is one of those things where we're saying open source isn't stopping, it isn't lagging behind. If anything, it's accelerating, especially with these big investments being made by some of the big players like Meta, etc. Let's go one step. I want to double tap on the whole EU Privacy Act, though, piece. So people can't download and run these models? What do you mean when you say they're not available in Europe?
So when they right now when they do the release in terms of availability for regional use, Europe is not on there right now.
So do you mean
So
like the
I don't
cloud services, like the people who are like putting this, setting this model up for you?
it in terms of it where you can download and use. I don't know specifically in Europe if you're just can't access it or what have you, but
Yeah.
in
Okay.
terms of what it's stated for the region availability, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's been the biggest worry with all of the regulation, right? That it'll stifle innovation. And it will be a really big hit if all of a sudden European researchers and contributors to open source can't get access to this latest model to iterate on top of it. It's just not great for, consumers either, right? To have less choice, less competition. So it's interesting to see how that very European kind of protectionist approach can slow things down. Is that a good thing after all these calls to slow down? Maybe things are going too fast. But I don't think Llama 3, as an example, is going too fast if OpenAI is allowed to be of that market, right? So it's definitely got to be something where it has to apply evenly to open source and third party players as well, or you're really looking at stifling innovation and competition.
Yeah. So I was very curious to see how that evolves, and I would love to know from Europe, like exactly what the experience. What can you? What can't you? How hard is it? Is it just kind of declared, or is it you're actually prevented? So
Yeah,
that was a
exactly.
really interesting one. Okay, so there was a just so you know, there's a lot of different LLM updates. I'm not talking about the other ones because unless you're implementing, you might not care so much about GPT-4's latest update. For instance, okay, the next one. Here's an interesting one. I do like to note something in legal when that's significant. So Adobe, we don't talk about Adobe much, but
Mm,
I think Adobe is one of the companies that's done really well leaning hard into generative AI and
I agree.
doing it right. And that's my judgment, doing it right. And this one I want to highlight. Adobe is, and the headline is, it is buying video clips for $3 a minute for the training data set for its AI model. So it actually, this one, they sent it out to, I believe, content creators that are on their list that's saying, hey, if you have video clips of basically expressions, emotions, fairly
Oh,
clean and labeled that are short, submitted in, essentially it kind of equates down to about $3 per minute. So they're really leaning into the assumption that generative AI models will have to be trained on fully licensed data. And number one is they're ahead of where the regulation is, but I love this bet and I love this lean because I do think they play really well in the creative space. And if they're making that stance, other companies will follow. What do you think about this one?
yeah, it is a great move. I agree because I think they're looking at the writing on the wall in terms of copyright lawsuits, etc., and then saying what would we bet on then to make a distinctive advantage? I think companies have been scrabbling to understand what can we get that builds a moat of some kind for us as opposed to competitors if everyone has access to the same models, whether it's through open source or paying OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic, etc., etc. But this could really be a case where they're like, well, we're going to start paying to create really particular data sets for particular use cases. And that's a really smart move, especially looking ahead at things like video, images, etc. Can you imagine how much? I wonder if you're just like, yeah, just license my whole likeness, go for it. I'm cool.
Yeah,
So
I
instead of the like giving blood at the blood bank, you'd be like, oh, I had to license my likeness, and now Polly's on the street corner hawking Viagra. It's really embarrassing. I needed the money.
my
We're
I
cool,
mean
Polly.
my My first reaction was I have three teenagers. I'm like, oh, I should tell them to go do this. They're freaking making videos all the time. They might as well
Make
be
some
like, yep,
money.
I did this to make some money and I contributed to AI models. How cool would that be to put on your college application? That's
Right.
where my head went because that's where my mind is at with my teenagers. But I really like this move. I like what Adobe is doing. I don't think we talk about them enough. They're really leaning well into the generative AI for creative space.
It'll be interesting to see if they can monetize something well enough that it justifies the prices that they're trying to pay people to get people to offer up their information. Because one of the key things that has made making these large language models worthwhile has been that the training data was cheap or free. And so all of a sudden you have to pay for it and you need large amounts of it. All of a sudden you're like, should we really pay $3 billion to get a billion smiles of whatever, or camera clips?
Yeah.
Can we really make that back? Right? That's going to be, it changes the uh, business model quite dramatically.
It's certainly very different than I think you and I talked about it last month when there was a interview with the OpenAI, I believe the CTO, who did not respond well to is your data licensed or not licensed that you would be
Yeah.
training on video. So this is why I really like the Adobe model that they're moving this direction. Okay,
Makes a lot of sense.
so that was wrap up on this one. Really like what Adobe is doing there on both the licensed content for training and how they're leaning into generative AI in general. I do want to bring back one of these other ones in the health space. Neither one of us are from there, so hopefully we won't get this wrong, but I really like this one. In So it was really early this month. There was the first ever FDA approval for an AI diagnostic tool for sepsis in hospitals.
Mm, so
So,
cool.
for if you don't know what sepsis is, and I didn't, I looked it up. So, sepsis is essentially it is a deadly condition that can happen anytime you have an infection where
Hmm.
your body overreacts to the point where you die. It just starts shutting down organs versus just giving you a fever. It thinks something happening. So this happens in hospitals quite a bit in terms of the total death from sepsis in a year. It's more than all the cancers combined. So it's this is one of those that it
Wow.
escalates quickly and it's deadly. But this is the first ever AI diagnostic tool to be approved to predict risk level as patients are entering the hospital. So I think this is a great use of AI because this is one condition where the earlier the recognition, the more likely you can treat it does not become deadly. So, what do you think about this one? We don't talk about health much, but wanted to flag this one.
Well, so many of the proposed health things with AI, use cases with AI, are so high risk where they're like, let's have it transcribe notes, and it's like, what if it gets it wrong? I love this one, and I love if you're looking to match use cases to AI capabilities and limits, something where it's like, hey, it's better to overmatch, and maybe we test 10% more people than we do need to more thoroughly. That is a great use case, right? We can do a first pass that is an early detection of something, and now we've identified the people that we need to test more closely, and 90% of those are actual hits. That can be huge cost savings in terms of we can't screen the whole population all the time for sepsis, but and look at the impact, right? So that tells me someone was thinking bigger than like, I've got to apply to my AI to my one little problem, and was looking at like, hey, where are the biggest impacts we could make? Let's pick something big like sepsis. It's freaking awesome. That's how
Yeah.
it should be done.
It, this is one of those that tends to disappear, but I really wanted to highlight it. It's the very first ever approval of a diagnostic tool driven by AI.
Wow.
And we're going to end on something fun, even though we want life saving. Now we're going to go world changing. No, okay. Fun in terms of world changing.
Yeah.
The music generation models. We had two
Oh,
this month. You first had
so
Suno.ai,
fun.
then you had Udio.ai within 2 weeks of each other. Now, I played with music generation before, so I want to tell you what was so awesome about these two models is they generate people singing as well as the instruments.
Right. It's
And
kind of
it
like
is a 2-minute song.
It was kind of like when at first we couldn't do writing in images, and it's better now. There's still some issues, but I mean, that was sort of what used to happen in a song. If you tried to get them to generate singing, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of creepy noises in the background, or like it was just like, no, please stop. Whatever you're doing, please stop. So the fact that it's words, that it makes sense somewhat, right? So cool.
So, of course, as you might guess, I spent all my spare time playing with these, making up songs
Your
this
kids
week.
must miss you, Yuying, sometimes.
And they're annoyed with me and all my songs. I'm like, look, I made a blues song about AI in the Google conference. They're like, what? Can you leave us alone? I made a R&B slow groove about our quarterly update from the AI team,
Very
which was just
cool.
raw. It was very raw. Everybody had a very good time laughing at it. But we will share one of the clips of the songs I've made. With it'll kick us out into the end of the show. Hopefully,
Oh,
my
perfect.
acoustic blues song about
Wh-
where is the truth in AI.
Oh, it's so deep.
Ollie, have you played
You know what? I haven't had a chance to play
with
with the
music?
music ones, and I want to. I mean, again, we've got to revisit our whole plan to make a musical, Barbenheimer the musical, something along those lines. I think we can figure this out now much easier than we could before. Our musical theater tendencies should be showing. I did see it kicked off another round of these like fake AI videos on TikTok. Have you seen that? Where they're like, I made up a country song, and they'll just have like an AI voice spouting like sort of words to do with country, like beer and boots, and then they'll be like, they've got guns in their butts and dirt in their beer, and like it's very like, just making fun, like it just jumbles up the words so it sounds stupid. Um, and I was like, I don't think those are real. I think they're just making fun of AI and how it used to be 6 months ago. They are funny, they are entertaining, but it's much like those old autocorrect texts. Like when they were real, they were really funny, but then people started making them up, and they're not as hilarious. So I think
Yeah.
the ones, and we'll see with our outro. I've heard that the latest ones are much better, much more coherent.
Oh, very. I think Weird Al. I mean, we're just gonna get AI versions of Weird
Yeah.
Al all over the place. I think one of the ones on not TikTok on X was sad girl piano song singing the MIT open source license terms. Some of these you're like, oh, that just explained the legal terms so much better. But
I was like, and you can tell it's
yeah,
still nerds playing with this.
yeah, and there's lots of ones that I cannot speak on air because we're going to get
Right.
censored. But yes, look them up. Definitely look them up in terms of the
Definitely.
songs. Yes, world changing right after life saving with our music models. And with that, we wrap up the news
That's the news this
for
month.
April. That's right. Over to you, Polly.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're going to look into some of the biggest questions we're getting, whether it's looking online or looking through the places where I have students and people asking me questions on my webinars. One of the ones I'm getting more and more frequently is, hey, can you talk to us about the real life examples of wins in enterprise? There's a lot of folks I still think who are like waiting for that evidence that that the hype is worthwhile, right? Particularly, I would say like all of certainly early last year into the beginning, like the late mid last year, everyone had chatbot on their roadmap, and a lot of middle level managers were kind of like, why? And it was all like very top down driven, right? And so I'll get questions like, hey, do we have proof that chatbots are the best interface? And it's like, the answer is no. I think it's not the right interface for lots of things. If you have things that you're doing every day quickly, easily in a form or something, people now understand, hey, don't just go make a chatbot for chatbot's sake, right? There's a lot more exploration into what situations people want a conversational interface, but there's a lot more blending into conversational interfaces. They're not so much like, here's our old interface and now there's a chatbot in the corner that we added, as kind of the blending of the two, right? And whether that's there's generative features in contextual menus, or while you're working with a chatbot, they can then open up another tool in the rest of your screen. We're even getting to points where we're getting tools that can control apps on your computer, and synchronize them, like we're seeing with the Office 365 kind of pieces. So you're like, this is looking more and more like an assistant who's autonomous and can actually control things digitally, at least. If not in the real world. There's definitely, I know there was a news story that came out about AIs calling up TaskRabbit to get people to do things for it, which was a little creepy. But as far as like, hey, here's where we're definitely seeing like return on investment in enterprise. It feels like a lot of companies are being very like tight-lipped about where they're seeing it. Like they aren't coming out and being like, "Oh, look at our amazing new XYZ." And there was a new report. Of course I'm blanking whether it was like Deloitte or McKinsey. We'll attach it in the show notes.
APMG.
Was that the one that had the 90% of the use cases are like internal cost savings use
KPMG
cases?
CEO Pulse was one, and the Stanford AI Index was the other report.
What's the other one? Exactly. So the one of the key takeaways for me was that 90% of the use cases that people are implementing and where they're really seeing ROI are these like internal process automation. So there's
That's what we're doing.
marketing, sales, customer service, right? That's yeah. And I think it's like everyone's been like, hey, if this is risky and I don't know what's going to do, let's keep it low risk and internal. But it's also, where the wins from understanding working with ChatGPT most clearly translate, right? You're like, oh, okay, I can work out this task, and if I can automate it in ChatGPT, then I can just do it with API calls, and now it's repeatable, right? So that 10% of revenue generation opportunities, that's so small compared to that 90% of cost savings. Now, I don't necessarily think that has to be the case forever. It happens to be the area people started with and the people where they're now seeing ROI. When I look at things like Spotify's Play, where they just translated all of their podcasts into multiple languages, like that's an amazing revenue generation opportunity, right? They've both expanded all of their creators' reach and expanded
We
their
should do our
listeners.
podcast in all the different languages, in Arabic, in Spanish, in French.
Spotify
I'm
might
gonna
do it
dub it
for us.
tomorrow.
I don't know
Oh,
exactly.
that's true. Yeah.
Our song won't
Right.
translate. Songs never translate, but we'll
It might. I don't know. It might be terrible. That'd be awesome.
exactly. And hopefully we're culturally appropriate in every possible region we could be broadcast and translated into. So, in summation, the big wins in enterprise. The big wins in enterprise. What's your take on the big wins in enterprise, Yuying?
So, everybody is doing internal because of the risk and because of the potential benefit. The revenue piece is difficult because there's no real new business models to make. There's so many open source. There's so many try it for free. Even if I had something cool, it's difficult to get the revenue. For us, so number one use case, new people onboarding, right? Just they have to ask a lot of questions. If you just make all that available through a chatbot, it's better for everybody. The second one, little less common, data analysis. So you and I are from product backgrounds. We like to get a lot of, you know, metrics, analysis, and you used to have to wait for analysts or data scientists or people to clean your data. Not anymore. I'm like, point me to the raw data. I got my own analysis going. And the
Yeah.
third one, actually, in terms of what a data is showing, the biggest gains right now is in developer productivity, mostly because of GitHub Copilot. Because it's embedded in their normal workflow. My architect says probably
Yeah.
70% of code he writes right now is written automatically by AI, and he's one of the most productive code writers we got. So the top tech people are actually benefiting the most from what I'm seeing.
That's very, very cool. And yeah, I think it's people hear that and they often say, "Oh gosh, if I can do something as complex as code and it does 70% of their work for them, can't it do any one of my jobs more better than I can?" But the thing to remember is that code is very structured. Like there's a defined format code has to be in. It's kind of a much more controlled language for the models to learn, right? So it's actually got a bit of an advantage at a task like code or anything that isn't as wide as like you can use any language that's available out there, any format or structure, right? It definitely is constrained and more of a constrained problem. It still doesn't mean that it's not amazing productivity gain. I've seen the studies 55 to 70% improvements in quality or in efficiency for coding. Clearly, if you're not using it for coding, then you're missing out right now because it's can definitely improve your productivity. So that's our take on enterprise wins, and especially why you haven't heard much about them in the news, is because so many of them are internal use cases. That was the biggest question we got this week in AI. I think it's time for our next segment now. Ying, are you ready to take it over?
Well, this is absolutely my favorite segment of not just our podcast, of all podcasts of all time. Of course, I am talking about BS in AI. This is where we really kind of dish and rant and go, that is so not true. I'm so sorry about that. And cut through the BS. So let me get to the first one. I will start us off and we will set the tone. So my bullshit. No, the AI bullshit that I'm going to call on this week is AI benchmarks. So we talk about all of these LLM updates, and right now they're all coming out with like, oh, look at the performance on this benchmark. We're so awesome. We crushed it. We did this. We did it. The numbers are 62.4 versus 60.3. Does it really matter? Has anybody really seen the impact that when the number gets bigger, it's better? Because, like guys always like to say, but it doesn't always matter. Anyway, my point is of course, I think AI benchmarks are bullshit for a couple of reasons. Number one, did you know they are not independently verified? That means the companies who made those numbers just ran it and be like, yep, we said it was 63.4, so you believe it. I don't. Number two, when the benchmark's been around long enough, the training data said, you know what, I can train my model with it. So I can get great answers. It's kind of like,
Exactly.
if I read the answers beforehand, I got 100. Woo me! Not really. Okay. Thirdly, if you look inside those benchmarks, is that real use case? Does that really change what I need to do with the LLM? I say no, but Polly, what do you say about AI benchmarks?
I completely agree. Like, we have over indexed on benchmarks as the way to measure. It kind of makes sense when you don't have another way to measure the general capabilities of a big model that does all these different tasks, to say, well, let's throw all these benchmarks at it and try to compare apples to apples by asking it the same set of questions. But it doesn't tell you anything about how relevant those questions are for the work you are trying to do. And LLMs are famously uneven. So they might have really great coverage about pizza restaurant reviews, but be terrible at electronics reviews or something. Like, you have no idea about where they're going to be strong or where they're going to be weak. You have to test. That's just the frustrating thing. You can get some advice, but honestly, if you're not setting up a capability to quickly add new models as they come out and test them on your use case, you're never going to be able to keep up in the current environment. Do you agree, Yuying?
I totally agree. So what I'm hearing you say, Polly, is that you have to make your own benchmark for the stuff that mattered to you and test the new models yourself to be like, yep, on the Yuying pizza review benchmark, it scored higher. Therefore, I'm going to use it for my pizza review chatbot. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. I would love to know what your benchmarks are, but that's for another time. Miss Polly, over to you for what you're going to call bullshit on this month.
Besides benchmarks, the other bullshit I'd like to call bullshit on this month. So you might have seen in the headlines, there was an agent software developer named Devin. And it first made headlines and a big deal because it was declared to be the first independent software developer who could even go as far as taking a software development job off Upwork and actually completing the job. So it was promising for those who are advocates of agent-based AI, meaning when we're giving AI a little bit much more independence and control, we can give it a goal like, hey, finish this Upwork job, instead of having to break that down for it and have it do that in multiple steps. It can just actually fire off its own processes, do its own planning, even verify its own answers before returning them to you. It's a very cool set of frameworks that people are developing for agents and agentic AI, but it really hasn't been proven anywhere yet. The opinion generally has been that it's too early and LLMs aren't reliable enough for this to work, for them to work in concert together this way. Devin was kind of the first step where people said they've cracked the case. It's a big startup that has just been valued at a lot of money. They've cracked the case and they can actually do something as complex as a whole software engineering job. But it wasn't it wasn't too long after that that we started to hear the cries from people online saying, hey, wait a minute, we checked out this demo that they've released. And just like many of these, all they've released is a demo, and only special early access people actually get to play with the tool itself. And the demo, I actually did a bit of a deep dive because I was interested in this, and it is kind of true that the demo of it pulling down a job from Upwork to do it, it is kind of BS. The flip side of that is the model is really impressive and can do a lot of impressive things. It is breaking new ground. So it's kind of like the Google Gemini demo last year, where it was everyone decried it for being a bullshit demo, and you're like, guys, it's a really impressive model, but they just took it too far in their marketing, right? The actual demo itself, it looks like the agent is like downloading a GitHub repository and fixing bugs in the repository. It turns out that all the files it was quote unquote fixing aren't real files. It had like written new files with bugs in them and then was fixing those bugs. It's kind of ridiculous. But even the task itself that they cherry picked to, from Upwork, that task was really like, explain to me this code and tell me what you do with it. It was a very vague and high level research task. It wasn't really a programming task. And people reported like, this is a really unspecified and really weird task for Upwork. Normally, you'd put out an RFP and have a period where people could ask questions and get clarifications on such a vague task. You wouldn't just take it down and do it. So to declare it was done when it was such a vague, task was pretty strange and not really consistent with how things really work anyway. So it was just kind of sad that that a company felt like putting themselves out there that extra inch and declaring, hey, we've reached this point where we basically can replace software developers on these low level programming jobs. So desperate to claim that, it kind of takes away from everything else they have done, and it might leave you with the impression that like, oh yeah, that was just a pile of shit. When really it is impressive what you can do with it, and I think it really will advance the state of software development if people can embrace it. Just not as much as they were showing in the demo. Did you get a chance to see it, Yuying?
Oh my God. I hate bad use case demos for AI right now. I don't mind cherry picking. Like everybody's going to cherry pick the best work. It's fine. Like the Sora kind of examples. But when the use case is unrealistic and then everyone has the hype and the big disappointment, you're like killing it for everybody building AI out there. They're just going to refuse to believe anything. Be like, I'm sure it's another one where they just made it up. And I hate that. They didn't have to. They could have just stuck with the performance of the actual coding because it is pretty amazing. But putting it in that bracket and then when people find out, everybody feels duped. That's the worst. You don't want people to feel duped. You want to be upfront, be like, look, it's in progress. The potential is here. The reality is here. We're going to work on it. Everybody would be fine. It kind of killed it for everybody else, which is why I hate it. And I really also feel bad for the technologists because I'm sure somebody else told them, hey, it's a good idea to do this. Devs didn't just come up with like, hey, we're going to fake this piece. So yeah, very upsetting. But come on, just be real, guys. You're technologists. Most of the people that's watching right now are technologists. We understand you can cherry pick, but don't fake it.
100%. 100%. I feel bad. And I feel like often marketing teams, if you're doing something that is going to be very developer facing, have some developers review it before you put it out, please, with a fine tooth comb. Have someone with a development hat on who's going to recognize bullshit like this. And don't be the ones putting that out there. I totally agree. Well, that is, we're nearly at our last segment. Our last segment is plugs for the end of the call. Yuying, was there anything you wanted to plug this week that's coming up?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Polly, because I have a newsletter on Substack and now also a version on LinkedIn that you can subscribe to, where actually this week I do the detailed breakdown of AI benchmarks if you want to see more detail of me ranting about that bullshit. It's Yuying's Substack for the Substack newsletter, or Gen AI Real Talk on LinkedIn. Love to see you on the newsletter. And for you, Polly?
I love Yuying's newsletter, and especially the benchmark breakdown this time was really insightful. It was exactly like what is in these benchmarks. So do check it out. I also have a newsletter now on LinkedIn, so do check me out on LinkedIn, subscribe there, or check me out on aicareerboost.com. We have a monthly masterclass about the path to AI careers in product management, which I do for free. The next one's on May 15th, so sign up there and join us. It's always a lot of fun. And lastly, we always shamelessly plug the podcast. So if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, give us some love on your podcast platform of preference. We'll love to hear from you. If you have any ideas of things that we should cover on the show, send it to support@aicareerboost.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts or the questions that you'd like to see answered. And that's been another episode of AI After Hours. Looking forward to drinking and talking AI with you again next month, Yuying.
Woo! Looking forward to seeing what you drink next time.